In today's video, I'm going to be going over the very controversial topic of controller versus mouse and keyboard in the whole aim assist debate. This topic has been fiercely debated about in the video game community, and more specifically, the Apex Legends community for years. Recently, this tweet came out which has really sparked the argument. It is from the user Elon's Emerald Mine and basically shows that 92% of the top 25 predators in PC lobbies are using a controller. This means that only 2 out of the top 25 ranked players are on keyboard and mouse, in PC lobbies too. Pros have started switching inputs, there are more complaints than ever before, and obviously this leads people to saying that clearly aim assist is broken and controller needs to be nerfed.
Coming from Jen Burger, honest opinion about aim assist, it should not be in games. Or it should be in games, but it should be like 0.2 aim assist or something. Look, this couple of months when I switched to NA, every single one of my teammates have been on controller. I even asked them, I communicate to them, are you on controller? They're like, yeah bro, I'm on controller man. Come on bro, it's superior input bro. Like, alright, relax. So like, everyone's switching to controller for what reason? It's broken. There we go.
But is it? Is aim assist and controller really that broken? In this video, I want to answer these questions as well as break down both sides of the argument, state whether it's worth it for you yourself to switch inputs, disprove some of the illogical points that get brought up, offer a long-lasting solution for competitive, and offer a solution for the Apex Legends community in general. If nothing else, watching this video will fully inform you on the controller versus keyboard and mouse debate, which is important for anyone that plays any games. Whether you are a casual player or one of the top pros, whether you play Apex, COD, or some other game, the aim assist debate does apply to you. Before I go into any more detail, I just want to state that I consider myself to be coming from a fairly neutral and unbiased point of view. I've spent time on all 3 inputs. Controller on console, controller on PC, and keyboard on PC. So honestly, I don't side too much with one or the other unless there is actual reason to do so. I'm also somewhere in between a complete casual player and a competitive one, so I'm looking at this from a fairly neutral standpoint. I want to start the video by laying out the common arguments and points that come from both sides. These days, it seems like the keyboard versus controller argument usually goes something like this. A keyboard and mouse player gets frustrated after dying to a controller player and calls them out, saying that aim assist is broken and that is the only reason they won. The general argument against aim assist in controller is that up close it is almost unbeatable, and in Apex close range encounters make up the majority of gunfights, so controller players have the advantage most of the time. Some anti-aim assist enthusiasts will then go on to say that controller takes little to no skill, and that picking up a controller takes far less time and talent than learning the ins and outs of keyboard and mouse.
In particular, when it comes to keyboard and mouse, I still think that even with everything that I said, keyboard and mouse still takes more raw skill, and that is just a truth that I'll never let go of. It's something that when I do say that type of shit, people kind of look at me a little bit weirdly in this industry, which I'm fine about. But when you have one giving you assistance and one not giving you assistance, dude, it's like having a handicap in golf and thinking that you got a good swing or that you're good at the game when at the entire time, you know, you're playing not necessarily with on your own accord.
Now, I'm not agreeing with any of this. I simply want to lay out the most common points made by both sides of the argument. The last thing I hear a lot on the keyboard side of things is that controller comes with this secondary advantage. Since aim assist is doing the aiming, or at least the majority of it, it makes it so the player can focus on other aspects of the game, things like awareness and thinking ahead in fights. Now on the other side of things, there are those defending aim assist in controller. The first point usually brought up from them is that aim assist is essential for controller players, and that it simply wouldn't be fair without it. And it's not even that broken anyway. Plus, PC players have all these other advantages like tap strafing and moving while looting death boxes. If anything, controller needs a buff. And anyways, if controller is so broken, then why don't you just play on controller? You're just mad you spent $10,000 on a PC, 240Hz monitor, and Ethernet just to lose to someone on their couch in the living room.
What complaining about aim assist says about you. There's a high chance you're playing on a $2,000 PC running at 120 plus frames per second with an RGB keyboard and mouse using the exact settings that pro players are using. Yet you complain about little Timmy running at 20 frames per second during fights on a 10-year-old console with severe stick drift fucking you up.
I want to mention that this whole thing usually starts from the keyboard and mouse players. They're usually the ones who first make a statement about anti-aim assist and controller players, and then the controller players are the ones who clap back. And the whole reason this thing is even a debate in the first place is because the keyboard players feel that using a controller is unfair, that they never really stood a chance or had an opportunity to fight back when they got lasered by a controller. And I will be honest here, I think there is some degree of truth to this. You can usually tell who the controller players are by the way they laser you.
Oh, what? Controller player? That is a controller player! It is! I knew it!
It feels a little familiar to playing against an aimbotter or hacker in those instances. But when you look at the argument and debate as a whole, I think it's important to note that keyboard players are usually the ones starting the dialogue and their reasons for doing so. With that being said, I want to elaborate a little bit and look at some of the facts. At least a small amount of aim assist is essential for controller players to compete on a relatively fair playing field, and the devs understand that. That is the whole reason aim assist was implemented in the first place. There have been studies and studies that show that aiming on an unassisted controller is way harder than aiming on a mouse. The control you get from using your thumb simply doesn't stack up to the control you get using your whole arm and hand. So then the problem becomes actually implementing the right amount of aim assist to make both sides happy. Making it so controller players are able to keep up with keyboard players, but not enough so controller becomes so strong it takes over the scene. And it's not really only Apex Legends that has this problem. All games where keyboard and controller mix have to decide what they do with aim assist and how they balance both sides out. It almost always happens that those games go through what I refer to as a controller is broken phase. It happened in Call of Duty, it happened in Fortnite, two games very similar to Apex. The difference is that in Apex the two inputs mix so much. Apex PC lobbies are filled with what it seems are almost half controller and half keyboard and mouse. And then when you see that 92% of the top predators are on controller, you realize really how big that is. I mean, in other games, if that number was 50%, people would be losing their minds. Then to go along with that, top pros and streamers like TSM Imperial Hal, Zipith, Zero, Senlu, and more are switching over. These are some of the most mechanically talented mouse and keyboard players who have spent hundreds of hours practicing and using aim labs, and even they are giving it all up to switch to controller. So what should you personally do? Does it make sense to switch to controller from keyboard and mouse, or the other way around? Or should you just stick with what you know? Well, here's my thinking. If the advantage on one or the other is big enough for the average player, then that could be reason to switch. Because let's be honest, the pros sometimes overblow issues like aim assist. It's way different on the level they are at versus how the average player experiences Apex. And right now, the main big advantage controller gives is its power and consistency in close range fights. Not only can aim assist completely lock on and destroy an enemy in a matter of seconds, but it also does it fairly consistently. And with the vast majority of gunfights in Apex being closer than 50 meters, this becomes a huge advantage for players at any level. It easily outweighs any movement technique or any other advantage that PC can offer. So honestly, I think that alone warrants a switch to controller.
Because like your
controller is not better. PC players have gone crazy, bro. Controller is better. Controller is better.
So once I got that figured out,
I don't know how people can even argue that anymore.
It's
because mouse and keyboard players can hit zipline bounces or fucking wall bounces and hit sick flicks. Does not make the difference of the fact that controller has literal
Here we go.
aimbot.
Let's get right into it.
aim assist that helps your aim in up close and medium range fights. That is just complete. That's not even close to fair. I don't care. I don't care if I'm a controller player. It's not fair. This whole game is based around winning your individual fights, and if you have aim assist, which is a way to be an unnatural
let's see who I get.
form of aim, it's better.
Let's see who I get.
It's better.
Same teams.
I'm literally one of the best controller players of all time, and I will tell you that aim assist is not fair in a game with mouse and keyboard players.
Obviously, my first recommendation would be to play the input that you enjoy the most. But if you're like me and you like playing on both, controller is the way to go. If you have never used a controller for FPS games, or maybe switched from console and haven't played on one in a while, then I would highly recommend you try it out, at least for a week or two. If anything, you'll have gained the ability to switch between inputs, which is a valuable skill to have in the video game world. Controller also has the advantage of being more beginner friendly. Most people can master almost all of the mechanics in the course of a week or two. The people who only play one or the other find it daunting to switch, but it's really not that difficult. Your game sense and decision making will carry over, which is really what matters. What people tend to forget is you'll be the same player on either input, just with the added benefit of what that input offers. Before I debunk some popular arguments and offer solutions, I would love it if you could like and subscribe. It only takes a second and I would really appreciate it. Thank you. So while I was making this video, I realized how many bad and faulty points are made on both sides. And I want to go over them now so you don't make the same mistakes. The first one I see all the time is people saying, if controller is so broken, then why don't you just switch to controller? I hear and see this all the time, especially from top players and streamers with huge audiences like Tim the Tatman.
A lot of people seem to complain about aim assist being broken, controller being broken, but then ultimately they, I mean, I tweeted yesterday and I truly stand by what I said. If controller is so broken, right, then play on it and play controller. If aim assist is so broken, then play aim assist, right? Play with it.
The problem with this argument is it completely counteracts the reason for adding aim assist in the first place. Aim assist is in games because developers want a level of fairness and inclusion between the inputs. The devs added it so controller players are able to play the game and not get destroyed. It's there for inclusivity. The whole reason aim assist is a thing is to allow the player to choose which input to use. And I think we can all agree controller and keyboard and mouse should be as equal as possible. So by telling someone they should just switch to controller if it's so broken, means you obviously don't understand the meaning behind it in the first place. Using that logic, the devs should just remove aim assist and everyone can play on keyboard and mouse. Also, if a legend or a weapon was considered overpowered, we wouldn't say, oh, let's all just run that weapon. No, we'd want balance and choice, which also benefits the longevity of the game. Not everyone likes to play on both inputs, and some people don't even have that option. So the goal is to have balance between the two so players have a choice. On the other side, you'll commonly hear people say that controller takes little to no skill, or at least less than mouse and keyboard. I think it's impossible to have any concrete evidence that proves or disproves this theory, but I can tell you right now, as someone who has played both, that controller doesn't take any less skill. It's easier to pick up, and more beginner friendly, yeah, which I think is where the misconception comes from, but it doesn't take less skill. Certain people usually resonate with one input or the other, and think the other one takes less skill to use. In reality, they are both just methods for playing the same game, Apex. If you're good on one, you'll be good on the other. There's not much more to it. Another one of the worst ones that floats around is this exact argument. All you have to do to instantly throw the entire PC versus controller argument in doubt is to play in a pred PC lobby and then go play in a pred console lobby. For the people saying this, I kind of understand where you're coming from, but after thinking about it for a couple seconds, you realize how irrational this entire point is. It's not even talking about controller versus keyboard and mouse. It's talking about PC versus console, which is entirely different. Most PC preds are playing on 4 times the FPS that console players are, which is a massive advantage in itself. But the reason this argument simply isn't valid is because PC is the industry standard. All the best keyboard and mouse players and all the best controller players play on PC. No pros or serious players are going to play on console over PC. And guess what? As I stated before, the vast majority of PC pred lobbies is on controller. So you're comparing controller players to controller players with this statement. I totally agree that PC pred lobbies are harder to play in than console ones, but that in no way proves that keyboard and mouse has a competitive advantage over controller. So before I give my solution for the overall Apex and video game community, I first wanted to give a solution for competitive. After all, pros and high-level players are usually the most passionate about this topic and have the most to say. They also dictate the opinions of a large majority of the player base, and keeping the pros and streamers happy will keep those players happy as well. When it comes to competitive, I am of the opinion that there should just be separate competitions for controller players and separate competitions for mouse and keyboard players. I originally saw this solution proposed by Shroud, a veteran in the FPS community who everyone watching probably knows.
I don't mind it. I think it's really cool that this game is crossplay. I love it. But I've always been like this, and I've always said there shouldn't be aim assist or controllers or whatever in tournaments. Like, you shouldn't mix it. Either you go only controller or you go only PC.
Yeah.
So like when in Apex, for example, like when you have like half and half, it's just kind of, I don't know, the competitive integrity is already gone from the get-go.
I agree with Shroud that controller and keyboard are never going to be exactly the same or exactly balanced, so they simply should not be competing against each other. It makes very little sense to have the two mixing in tournaments and competition when there's millions of dollars on the line. Of course people are going to get upset and complain. Obviously this is only a suggestion. I am not the first one to come up with it or recommend it. It's simply what I think would be best for most FPS games with a competitive scene, including Apex. Do I think this will ever actually happen? No, probably not. I just can't see the devs making a change this big anytime soon, which is sad because I think it would help esports and the controller versus keyboard debate massively. Finally, I just want to share my thoughts on a solution for the Apex Legends community and video game community as a whole. I think it comes down to this: respecting the player for their gameplay, not their input. I think far too often we judge players on what input they use, looking past their gameplay and accomplishments. The only way this argument will ever get better is if both sides respect each other, because honestly, this debate will never really end. It's impossible to have the two inputs be exactly equal to each other. One is always going to have advantages over the other in certain areas and vice versa. Once we realize that aim assist is in the game for good, once we realize it's the players playing, not the input, is the day that the controller versus mouse and keyboard debate is finally settled. That was it for the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned more about the mouse and keyboard debate. I highly encourage you to like and subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you made it this far in the video. I also recommend you to check out my channel. I can guarantee it will help you out. With that being said, have a great rest of your day and thank you so much for watching.